It began with something so small, so fragile, and yet so heavy that it broke my heart to witness. An old man's grocery bag tore open on a frozen street, spilling oranges across the ice as his trembling fingers tried to catch them. The snow fell thicker that night, sticking to his hair, clinging to his thin coat, and biting into his skin like knives. The world moved quickly around him, cars spraying slush, footsteps hurrying past, doors shutting against the cold, but there he was on his knees, trying to gather the pieces of his life one fruit at a time. I watched from my window, unable to look away, because deep down I knew that if someone didn't step in, that man wouldn't make it home with those groceries, or perhaps even make it home at all. And that single moment made me ask myself, who would stop and who would keep walking? I had only moved into this neighborhood a few months earlier, hoping to find peace in the quiet streets, hoping to reset my own life after years of noise and exhaustion. I didn't know many people. I kept to myself. But that night, the silence outside was too loud to ignore. It was the kind of silence that presses against your chest when you realize you are witnessing someone's private battle in public. And everyone else is pretending not to see. I could tell he was proud, that man. Even as his knees wobbled and his breath came out in clouds of pain. He shook his head when a stranger glanced his way as if to say, "Don't bother with me, I'll manage." But I also saw the first red flag. The way his hand went to his chest, the way he leaned for balance against a lamppost, and the way his body seemed to fold into the weight of the world he was trying to carry in those bags. And I knew this wasn't just about groceries anymore. It was about survival. He paused under a streetlight, the glow flickering like it, too, was struggling to stay alive. His hands were shaking, his legs stiff as wood, and I thought for a moment he might collapse right there into the snow. A car sped by, tires hissing against ice, its headlights washing over him without stopping. A neighbor across the street peeked through their curtains only to draw them shut again, not willing to be drawn into the suffering they had just witnessed. And then, in a cruel twist, the milk in one bag slipped free and burst across the snow, spreading white across white, except this white was waste, loss, and humiliation. For a long second, he just stared at it, as though the last bit of strength he had was draining away with that milk. I felt the urge to run down and help him myself. But before I could even reach for my boots, I saw someone else appear. He wasn't who you'd expect. A teenager, barely 16, maybe 17 at most. His hoodie pulled up, hands shoved deep into his pocket, headphones dangling loosely from his ears. At first I thought he'd be like everyone else, pass by without looking, lost in his own world of music and scrolling screens. But the boy stopped. He crouched down in the snow, brushed an orange clean, and placed it gently back in the bag. One by one, he gathered the fruit like it was gold, like it mattered. The old man muttered something, shook his head, insisting faintly, "I can manage." His pride spoke louder than his frail body, but the boy ignored the protest. He lifted both grocery bags as if they weighed nothing and looked him in the eye. "Where do you live, sir?" he asked. That one question felt like a spark in the storm. It was not pity, it was not intrusion, it was responsibility disguised as care. And as simple as it was, it had the power to shift the night's story. Research shows, and this is kindness nugget number 1, that even the smallest questions of concern, like asking someone if they're okay, can reduce their feelings of isolation by nearly 30%. Just words, but words that lift, yet not everyone around understood. I saw a couple walk past on the other side, their coats sleek, their shoes crunching on clean snow, whispering, "He shouldn't be out here at his age." It was judgment masquerading as observation, and still not a single hand extended to help. But the boy waited patiently, not moving until the man whispered his address. That was the turning point, though none of us knew just how deep this story really went. What I didn't know then was that this man had once carried the weight of an entire family. He had been strong, dependable, the one others leaned on. His wife had passed away the previous winter, a loss that hollowed his world. His daughter had moved states away, busy with her own children and unable to be there. His license had been revoked after his eyesight weakened, leaving him with no choice but to walk 2 miles each week just to buy food. It wasn't just an errand. It was his last thread of independence. Every trip to the store was an act of defiance against the loneliness, pressing in on him, and on this night, the storm was stronger than his body. Those groceries were more than items in a bag. They were his dignity, his stubborn refusal to let go of self-reliance. The boy, without knowing all this, picked up the burden as though it were natural. And in the glow of that flickering street light, the old man's eyes filled with something rare glistening gratitude. He didn't know how to speak. They walked slowly, trudging through snow that soaked shoes and numbed toes. I pulled on my coat and followed at a distance, not wanting to intrude but unwilling to let this moment vanish without bearing witness. Each step was heavy. The old man's breath rasped against the night air, his cough bending him double until the boy steadied him, practically holding him upright at times. It wasn't just about helping him get home anymore. It was about saving him from collapsing, from giving in to the storm, from disappearing unnoticed in the cold. Science tells us, and here's kindness nugget number 2, that receiving help in hard times doesn't only improve survival chances emotionally, it even strengthens the body's immune system. Kindness is not just soft, it is biological armor. And yet, the tragedy was this. Not a single car stopped, not a single porch light opened its door. Neighbors existed, but did not act. And still, that boy carried on. If you've ever seen someone struggle, pause here and remember this moment. Screenshot it. Share it with a friend. Whisper it into the ear of someone who has forgotten the weight their kindness can carry. Because kindness is heavy. But it carries us all. By the time they reached the man's brick house at the end of the lane, the groceries had become a symbol, not just supplies. The boy didn't stop at the door. He helped place the bags inside, stacked the cans neatly on the counter, wiped down the surface, and even boiled water for tea, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. What stunned me more was what followed. The boy went back to school the next day and told his friends. Not for praise, not to brag, but simply to share what had happened. His friends began taking turns walking the man's groceries home. Then, their parents joined in. Soon, without posters or announcements, a quiet food drive emerged in the neighborhood. Bread, soups, jackets, blanket supplies appeared on his porch, small notes tucked between them. No one was trying to be a hero. They were just trying to match the boy's courage with their own. One act of kindness had snowballed into a chain of compassion. Weeks later, I watched the man step into his local school gym for an assembly he didn't expect to attend. He was shy, trembling, and uncertain why he had been invited. But when he reached the stage, every single student rose to their feet. The sound of applause filled the hall, thunderous, unstoppable. And there beside him stood the teenager who had first stopped on that snowy night, now smiling awkwardly, as if all this attention was too much. The old man tried to speak but was overcome by sobs, gasps breaking from his chest as he clutched the microphone. I thought I was invisible, he managed finally, but you carried me home. Gratitude poured out of him like the snow melt. In spring, and this is where kindness nugget number 3 becomes truth, psychologists have found that gratitude speeches like this don't just honor helpers, they actually double the likelihood that those helpers will choose kindness again. Gratitude multiplies generosity. From that day on, snow no longer felt cruel in our neighborhood. It became a reminder, a shared story etched into every falling flake. Neighbors who had once kept curtains drawn began greeting each other warmly. Teenagers who once rushed by with earbuds in now checked in on elders. The old man, though still frail, was no longer alone. And the boy who had simply asked, "Where do you live, sir?" became the spark that lit an entire street with compassion. The storm had tested them, but kindness had answered louder. But the story did not end there. Months later, after the man passed peacefully in his sleep, the boy found an envelope in his mailbox. Inside was a letter written in shaky handwriting, but clear enough to change his life forever. It read, "You didn't just carry my groceries, you carried me." And that is why, next week, I will tell you about the forgotten child whose song silenced an entire city.